Hello everyone, welcome back to another Doctor Who video where today I just want to go over some of the latest news, including some potential scheduling conflicts to do with the live broadcast of Doctor Who on BBC, as well as some new quotes from Russell T Davies of course, and a very special request from a certain fan. All that and more coming up, but be sure to subscribe if you're new, that would be greatly appreciated. And let's dive right into it. So kicking off this news video, no pun intended, we have this, which is the FA Cup semi-final schedules have just been confirmed with more potential disruption to Doctor Who. In addition to the final on 17th of May, BBC One will show Crystal Palace v Aston Villa on Saturday 26th of April with a 5:15 PM kickoff. Now if you don't know what this is referring to, in a previous video we discussed the fact that episode 6, the Interstellar Song Contest, is airing in between the FA Cup final and the Eurovision Song Contest. And why is this problematic? Well, because if the FA Cup final goes into extra time, that could mean that the Interstellar Song Contest would be bumped off the schedule because Eurovision is live. And it looks like a similar thing is happening with the semi-final, where they're also airing that. And of course, if that goes into extra time, that may also affect another episode. This time, it's 26th of April, so that would be episode 3, The Well. Now, it's worth noting, and TV Zone does point this out, that it's highly likely that the BBC would have bidded for the Sunday game, Manchester City versus Nottingham Forest, but due to the fact that Britain's Got Talent airs live, it's likely that ITV didn't want that one either, so it's fallen with the BBC because at the end of the day, Doctor Who isn't live. Now of course, if you watch it on iPlayer, which to be blunt, I will be doing, this won't affect you, but for those of you who do value like a going and watching Doctor Who live experience, be aware that you might have some disruptions as a result of the football. You might not, but you also might, so just bear that in mind as we go into these coming weeks. I mentioned in a previous video Russell T Davies seemingly shutting down a rumour that the TARDIS had been destroyed and dismantled as a result of fears of cancellation, which a bunch of people were covering, and now we have the most definitive proof we could possibly have, because even before now people were saying, oh well, Russell could lie and it could actually be gone, but really, you know, he's just saying it's not to save face. But now we've had this from Screen Alliance Wales on Instagram, a very exciting visit to Wolf Studios Wales yesterday, as Bad Wolf TV and Screen Alliance Wales had the absolute pleasure of hosting a visit to EU ambassadors, and it lists them all, to basically show off Welsh film industry. And yeah, you can see them all there, stood on the TARDIS. And in case you're thinking that this isn't true, it's also on the Bad Wolf Twitter account. Yesterday at Wolf Studios Wales, we had the honour of welcoming an incredible delegation of EU ambassadors to share the work we're doing at Bad Wolf TV and shine a light on the creative force in South Wales. So this was yesterday, and we now have eyewitnesses, all of these EU ambassadors, to the fact that the TARDIS is very much still up. Now, unless you want to try and convince me that the entire EU is manufacturing a conspiracy to cover up that Doctor Who is in fact no longer going to be made, then it seems pretty likely that that TARDIS is still standing, and that whole rumour, alongside the rumour that Ncuti Gatwa wasn't going to appear for press due to bad blood, are completely bull. And I just wanted to highlight this just to show, be careful of who you trust and who you believe. One of the reasons I cover a lot of rumours on this channel is not necessarily to give them legitimacy, but to actually kind of deconstruct what they're saying and say when I agree or don't agree with them. But a lot of these people will just regurgitate things they hear without any critical thinking, and I just want you to be aware of those people, because they are out there, but in this case they have been demonstrably and definitively proven wrong on multiple occasions. I don't know why you would lie about something that's so easy to check. Like, it was obviously going to come out at some point that the TARDIS was still there, just inevitably. I think this largely came from the fact that they were using a kind of like screen of the TARDIS in the background of like the social media videos. But as many people have pointed out, those could have been filmed while they were on tour in America, thus they didn't have the set to hand. There's many reasons why they could be doing that. It could also be that the set was undergoing maintenance at the time. It is a big set after all. But yeah, once again, a rumour with absolutely no credibility, shot down into smithereens, which is admittedly very funny. I thought this was very interesting. Obviously, Russell is doing the press tour for Doctor Who, and he had an interview with Wales Online where Doctor Who boss rules out too expensive star to play Doctor Who if Ncuti Gatwa leads the role. In the 63 years Doctor Who has been on our screens, there has never been a Welsh Doctor, and as a Welshman, I personally feel this. I mean, we've been making the show for 20 years, the least you could do is let us have a Doctor. That's what I say. But Welsh Doctor Who showrunner Russell T Davies has shot down the possibility of Michael Sheen becoming the next Time Lord, joking, "We can't afford him. In the 60 years Doctor Who's been on screens, a Welsh actor has never picked up the iconic sonic screwdriver." However, in a recent interview with Wales Online, Russell, who was in Cardiff to discuss the launch of National Theatre, more on that here, put to bed the chit-chat that Port Talbot actor will not be making history as the first ever Welsh Doctor. Oh, in fact, I'm sorry, this wasn't the press tour for Doctor Who. The question of who will play the next Doctor has been one hotly debated topics among fans and media speculation that the current Time Lord Ncuti Gatwa is moving on from the role. Wales Online added another twist by suggesting that Welsh actor Michael Sheen is a possible candidate. However, Russell has permanently passed on the idea, saying it's too late for Michael to take on the coveted role. Speaking with Wales Online, Russell explained that why Michael, despite his immense popularity and experience, won't be moving into the TARDIS anytime soon. "We can't afford him," he laughed, "but in all seriousness, he's too busy. Plus, he's been in Doctor Who. It's too late, he's been an evil voice." This refers to his previous involvement in the 2020 episode The Doctor's Wife. While Michael's portrayed a menacing alien that was memorable, Russell has made it clear that past participation in the show rules him out of the role of the Doctor. That's a weird justification for him to give, in my opinion, given the multiple actors that have played things before and still come back in different roles. In fact, just this year, we're having that with Varida playing Belinda when she previously played Monday Flynn. So, bit of a kind of lazy kind of justification. I think it's more likely that what the first reasoning was, that we can't afford him, is probably true, and he's also probably too busy. I mean, Michael Sheen has been one of my fan casts for a very long time. I do genuinely think he would be good. I do love him in Good Omens. But he probably is, too busy and established at this point to do it. As much as I would love to see him do it, and as much as I would love to finally see a Welsh Doctor, unfortunately it doesn't seem likely. And I'm also not ready for Gatwa to leave necessarily yet. Speaking of Russell, he had another interview clip with Radio Times, this one talking about Anita Dobson and how he confirms that she appears at multiple points during this series, which I think we all kind of assumed, but this is him confirming it.
What can you tell us about Mrs. Flood's role in this season, how that plays out?
She will be popping up every week. Last year we had Susan Triad popping up every week, but she had no idea who she was. This is the complete opposite. This is someone who clearly knows very much. I mean, she kind of unveiled herself at the end of the last series, standing on a rooftop with a parasol in a white fur coat in the snow, saying, "I'm going to bring absolute terror." So the gloves are off, really. It's funny, people keep asking me, "What's Mrs. Flood like?" I go, "Are you not watching?" It's like, there she is, clearly pulling the curtain aside, saying, "Here I am." Yeah. If that's not the arrival of a villain, I don't know what is. So lots of fun with her. Enormous. She is so wonderful to work with, that woman. I love working with Anita Dobson. I mean, I kind of knew it would be, but didn't know how much fun it would be. She's cheeky and funny and does get an awfully lot more to do. So, again, you'll see that as it develops.
So yeah, I found this very interesting for a couple of reasons. Obviously, the one thing is, of course, that she appears in every episode, similar to Susan Triad last year, and many people have picked up on that similarity, and I'm glad that he's aware of it and has pointed to the contrast in it. Whereas Susan Triad had no idea why she was there all those times, whereas with Mrs. Flood, she is very aware of why she is there and is actively watching the Doctor for some reason. The other thing I find interesting is, of course, him basically saying, yeah, she is definitely the villain. I did think for a while that they were going to pull, an Uno reverse, where it turned out she wasn't evil at all. She just looked that way. But no, it doesn't seem like they're doing that. The one thing I don't want her to be is the Rani. That's the one thing I don't want her to be. I mean, if she is the Rani, I'm not going to, stop watching the show or anything. But I do think that would just be the most obvious way they could go about it. I don't know whether that's accurate. I know that there's been some, rumours about who Mrs. Flood is, but I've been trying to at least keep some things a surprise for myself going into this series, but that's the one person I don't really want Mrs. Flood to be. I just think it's a bit too obvious. I want someone, a bit out there to be the identity of Mrs. Flood, if not a new character entirely, but I know if they did that, then it would kind of, upset people because they'd want it to be someone returning for all of this build-up. I don't know. But interesting that he acknowledged that similarity. I just hope that Mrs. Flood has a good payoff. I do love Anita Dobson, though. I think she's really good in the role. Speaking of Mrs. Flood, Russell T Davies, when answering about Mrs. Flood, "Please stay offline because someone out there has spotted all already, like they do." So I think this is referring to someone basically figuring out who Mrs. Flood is, which is interesting because I've heard multiple conflicting, ideas, so I don't actually know what he's referring to. I'm kind of curious as to why he even confirmed that someone has figured it out. why would you say that? Surely you would just pretend like it was still a complete secret. I don't know, because surely that's going to lead more people to want to know who was the one who figured it out. I don't know, it just seems like a weird choice to me. But he said, anyway, in this finale, the Doctor finds himself alone and out of his depth. Also, there are sacrifices. Good, because for the God of Death, no one died in Empire of Death. I want, like, the Doctor to have to deal with something and have it stick. That's what I want. The other thing they said in this article that I found very interesting, I think it was this article, was that the Doctor is going to get a lot angrier this series, which is something I really was keen to hear because, as you know, one of my favourite scenes in Joy to the World and of the 15th Doctor so far in general is the scene where he's being mean to Joy in the elevator scene. And I think, for me, I want more scenes of the Doctor like that. More of the schema, more of that 7th Doctor, 2nd Doctor type of thing. And if they go more in that direction, that's something I'm very much open to. Russell T Davies also said on Lucky Day that, yes, what we thought was true, there's a little glimpse of a Doctor in a Ruby story we have never seen before, and there were ways and means of making him appear within the story as a living force kind of thing. So yeah, it is a flashback story of some kind. The thing that confuses me is that last line about there were ways and means of making him appear within the story as a living life force kind of thing. Now, I don't know whether this is just talking literally, as in he is a physical presence on screen this time, unlike in 73 Yards, where, say for the intro, he is basically disappeared from existence, or whether he's talking more metaphorically and maybe the 15th Doctor appears to Ruby, but more as a kind of a manifestation or something like that. I'm assuming it's the former, and maybe it's just worded oddly, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. I am curious to see a prequel kind of episode. I guess that's one of the benefits of filming season 1 and 2 back to back, is that you can have a season 1 flashback where they look the same, because hardly any time has passed for the actors. I've been having a very specific comment from a user by the name of Farsight-NC1IB, saying, "You're still not covering the YouGov poll about Doctor Who and its popularity?" And he's been commenting this for the last 4 days. And the honest truth of why I didn't cover it is because too much was going on. There's been too many articles and too much stuff to do with Doctor Who to cover, so honestly, I kind of just forgot about it. But since this guy really, really wants me to cover it, I'll cover it. And everyone just say Farsight in the comments, and he'll know that I covered it. But what he's referring to is this, which is a poll conducted by YouGov that basically suggests that Doctor Who is losing public favour. Now, for those of you who don't know, YouGov are a political polling entity who, as a result of Doctor Who coming back next month, have polled the British public as to their opinions on Doctor Who, and they've broken it down by a region, gender, politics, age, and social grade. And this was a survey conducted by just over 4,000 UK residents, and as you can see, the poll shows a narrow advantage to classic Doctor Who, with 20% of the population preferring the classic series, as opposed to 15% on 2005 onwards, 10% saying they like it about the same, 20% saying they don't like either, 9% saying they don't know, and not applicable, have never watched either, at 26%. Which is interesting. I think this is about accurate to what I expected. I think the stat that impresses me the most is the 26% that said have never seen either. Like, you kind of assume at some point that, like, Doctor Who, even if it's not watched, like, regularly by most of the population, would have at least been seen once by most of it, but maybe not. But yeah, this goes into a lot of interesting kind of statistics here. You know, you can break it down by region, and obviously places like London have a preference for revived series Doctor Who, whereas I believe every other region has a preference for classic Doctor Who, although, to be fair, with Scotland and Wales, it's very, very close between the two. But the number of people who haven't seen either does get quite high, and I think the thing that's interesting to me about this is more the age statistics, but we'll go over the others. This is interesting. 25% of males prefer classic Who, whereas with females, they also slightly prefer original Doctor Who, but only by 1 point. I wonder how much of this is just people saying they preferred it back in the day and not really necessarily indicating a preference. Obviously, it shows that more women have not seen Doctor Who as opposed to men, at least according to this poll, and more women say they don't like either as opposed to men. Interesting. And then we can go into politics, which says, of course, conservative voters, of course, have a massive preference for Classic Who. Labour voters have a preference for New Who. Lib Dems, it's about an equal split down the middle with a narrow preference for New Who. And then Reform, of course, have an even bigger preference for Classic Doctor Who, which again makes sense. Largely, it seems that the further right your politics are on the spectrum, the more likely you are to be a fan of Classic Who over New Who, and the further left you are, the opposite is obviously the case. I think the statistic that is slightly worrying, though, and it's the one that people have kind of pointed out, is the age demographics, specifically the not applicable haven't seen either, where the two youngest age demographics, i.e. the age demographics that Doctor Who is most supposed to be appealing towards, are the most likely to have not seen either iteration of Doctor Who, at 39% for 18 to 24-year-olds and 31% for 25 to 49-year-olds. Because I think the other statistics are fairly obvious, you know. More right-wing people don't like more modern Doctor Who because it's seen as being more socially progressive, and that bears out between regions, and also I believe it showed that like men have a preference for Doctor Who over women and stuff like that. But I think this is a slightly worrying statistic. And it's not just necessarily, like, a current Who problem either, because they've not seen either. But then I suppose they're more likely to see New Who, and if they don't see New Who, they're definitely not going to see Classic Who, because that's all on the iPlayer next to New Who, so it's interesting. I mean, that was interesting. I don't know whether it's really the killing blow to Doctor Who that Farsight seemed to suggest that it was. Yeah, I do think it's slightly worrying that the age group that is supposedly the target for Doctor Who at the moment are most likely to have not seen either, whereas older people are actually more likely to have seen and engaged with Doctor Who. But at the same time, I think that can be overcome. But that's about everything I wanted to cover today. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you later.